sustainable. We're looking for individuals that are committed to driving business as a force of good in the New York City metropolitan area. And we focus on education, advocacy, community building, and our vision is to connect, inspire, and activate conscious capitalists in our community. And one of the events like that is this one that we're hosting tonight. So we're excited to have you all with us today, and we hope to introduce you to some of the conscious businesses in the New York area with a focus on food at the same time. So you can bring together your passion into the business because business is personal. There was a time that you would hear people say business is business, but that's not the case anymore. Business is personal. So this is what is fun about tonight's event, because I am a foodie, so I love food, I love New York City, and we get to bring all that together tonight. So if you're interested in learning more about the New York City chapter, there's a number of ways that you can get involved. Stay connected through social media, join us for these different type of events. You could sponsor the chapter, volunteer to assist us, or also join the Senior Leader Network. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out in the chat, feel free to follow us on any of the social medias, and we'll get you more information. So I wanted to first introduce our sponsor, because we talked about one of the things is financial viability as a group and getting the word out and really getting people engaged. So most of us are doing this as volunteers because we believe in the movement and want to drive change. So one of our sponsors this year is Amalgamated Bank. And if you want to talk about a conscious business, first thing you do is go to their website and you see right up at the top issues we care about. So you know that they're driven by purpose. So we're extremely excited to partner together with them to bring business leaders together and inspire people with the stories and best practices of conscious businesses. And today we have Cynthia Delagias with us. She's the Director of ESG Investing at Amalgamated Bank, where her focus is on bridging the relationship between her network of global family offices, leading foundations, and institutions with ESG investment possibilities. She's been focused for over a decade to assist leaders conceptualize, develop, and grow socially and environmentally conscious businesses. She's also a member of our corporate board. So Cynthia, can I ask you to share a few words about Amalgamated and partnering with conscious capitalism this year?
Thank you, Kathy, so much. And thank you everyone for joining tonight. I'm so excited to be here and to meet everyone. So I'll share a little bit about Amalgamated. So Amalgamated was founded in 1923 by the clothing workers of New York City, a union that was founded by immigrants in New York City that didn't have access to traditional financial tools. So they created their own capabilities. So Amalgamated has continued this work over the last 100 years, advocating for workers' rights, equal justice, social equality, and our work for climate preservation. And the bank really prides itself on being the first of many. We pioneered the first free savings account, unsecured personal loans, and foreign exchange transfer to allow immigrants to send money back home. We provide financial literacy programs in all of our branches. We provide scaled capital to CDFIs that open up investment opportunities for immigrant communities and those that traditionally don't have access to the same financial tools that larger institutions do. That type of work is really pivotal to the type of conversation that we're going to be having today. We're an organization that really prides ourselves on diversity and inclusion, and proud to say that we're led by the first female of color to be the CEO of a publicly traded financial institution, something that obviously we're extremely proud of. Like Kathy said, I've joined Amalgamated at a really pivotal point where ESG and value-based investing is no longer a nice to have. It's now something that you absolutely need to care about if racial justice, the environment, or social equality is something that's important to you. And we're really honored and excited to partner with Conscious Capitalism this year. I think we're a relationship that has been made in heaven in many capacities. We have a lot of overlap, and we're just really excited to partner with a community that's so values aligned to the type of things that Amalgamated cares about. So thank you everyone for joining tonight. Really excited to be here, and thank you everyone for sharing your time. Kathy.
Thanks, Cynthia. Appreciate it. Well, let me turn it over to Raji now to kick things off, introduce our panelists, and get into the discussion. Raji?
Thank you, Kathy. Can everyone hear me? Thumbs up. Yeah, good. All right, cool. So welcome. I'm really excited to be bringing this panel to everyone tonight. I don't know about you, but I at least consider myself a foodie. If I could have been a food critic in as a career, I probably would have done it. And when I joined the board of Conscious Capitalism about a year ago, I was tasked with coming up with creative ideas for events, and someone said something about food, and I was like, I have it. I got it. Let me take the reins. I got this under control. I myself do not work in food, but I work at the Center for Reproductive Rights as their CFO. I just joined this month, actually, but I've been in the social sector, social enterprise sector for the last 15 plus years. And so conscious capitalism is definitely something that is near and dear to me. But without further ado, I would love to introduce our panelists tonight, because I know everyone's waiting anxiously for that. And some of you who purchased the tickets with the snack boxes, if you ordered it before the first week of February, you should have already received your snack box. So hopefully you're enjoying some of the treats along with the panel. And Wissam can tell you more about what you've ordered. For those who haven't, you can still get your snack box. It's not too late. We will be shipping another round out. But I would love on my screen, I see Victoria first. So maybe we just do a brief introduction of yourself and your business that you either work at. And then we'll get into the meat of our topics today.
Thank you, Raji. Thank you everybody for being here. We're really excited to share and chat tonight. My name is Victoria. I work for Brooklyn Grange. Brooklyn Grange is a triple bottom line business, which for folks who are not familiar, it means that we really look at our impact on the planet, the people, and our profit when making business decisions and strategies. That's the triple P strategy. What do we do? So we farm rooftops. We build green spaces throughout New York City, and we promote sustainable living and local ecology through food, education, and events. Usually when I tell folks that, they're like, I don't know what any of that means. So I'm gonna just quickly share my screen to show you some photos of what we do. It's usually a little bit more effective. Let me know if this is working. Great. So when we started in 2010, we leased our first rooftop in Long Island City, just under an acre, where we grew produce and we sold it through farmers markets, through our community support agriculture program, and we hosted some events there. 2 years later, we leased another rooftop at the Navy Yard, a little bit bigger, and we grew our programming and events department, where we hosted private events like weddings, corporate, events, team building events, and also hosted public programming, educational program for folks in the community. Our newest farm is in Sunset Park, 3.2 acres. It's huge. And here this farm was actually designed by and installed by our design build team, which is the newest arm of our business, which I'll talk about a little later. So our farms produce food for wholesale outlets. So that's like restaurants, online buyers. We have farmers markets, our CSA, community support agriculture, and we also grow food for our no-cost food distribution program, which I'll talk about later. Some public programming. We do beekeeping classes, amongst many other things. Host some nice weddings and events. We had our first fashion show last year, which was very cool. Lots of celebs, which was really fun for our farmers who are not always looking the most glamorous. And our design build team designs and builds green spaces for the city. So this is for, residential homeowners, for developers who are creating amenity terraces or rooftops, work with a wide variety of clients. And most recently, our largest project in our design build team was the rooftop farm atop the Javits Center expansion that launched last growing season. And we're really excited for this upcoming growing season. So that's about it.
Thank you, Victoria. Awesome pictures. I think I went to the Brooklyn Navy Yard before, like just as you guys were starting up, which was really cool to see the beginning stages of that.
Yeah, very cool.
And let's kick it off to Jeff from PS Kitchen.
Hi, how are you? Thanks for having me. I'm Jeff Lapadula. I'm the co-general manager of PS Kitchen. We're a plant-based vegan restaurant in Times Square in Manhattan, of course. And we donate all the profits to charity as well. So it's a really cool spot. That definitely is in line with a lot of what everybody's talking about. We also employ folks from underprivileged backgrounds, both previously incarcerated folks, previous victims of domestic violence or sex trafficking. And we also employ folks who are sometimes even currently experiencing homelessness or recently homeless. So yeah, we've been open since 2017, and we've had, of course, some challenges of late, as anyone who knows the plight of hospitality industry, especially in New York City, especially in tourist district of Times Square. So we've had some struggles in the last 2 years, but we're still here. And yeah, I really appreciate the opportunity to speak about PS Kitchen and listen to everyone else. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff. And I highly encourage anyone who's in the New York area, if you ever want a great meal, they have, I've been there many times. Love the restaurant. I'll kick it up to Wissam, who will talk about his venture Eat Off Beat.
Yes, thank you, Raji. So my name is Wissam Kai. It's a real pleasure to be here alongside two great companies that are innovating in this space and have a social mission as well. So I'm the co-founder and CFO of a company called Eat Off Beat. And basically what we do is, it's a New York-based company that hires refugees that are talented refugees, talented chefs basically, from a variety of countries. And they cook their own food, home style, the way they cook it at home, from their home countries, obviously, in our kitchen in Long Island City. And we distribute it to New Yorkers. So before the pandemic, we used to do only catering for offices and for universities, nonprofits, United Nations. After the pandemic, we were also impacted, and just like you mentioned, Jeff, and we pivoted our business and we started doing meal boxes and snack boxes. So meal boxes are distributed fresh and they're ready to heat in New York City and in the New York metro area. And the snack boxes are shipped nationwide. They're dry food, and some of you, I understand, got some of these today. So can I take just a minute to share my screen? I'll try to, in a nutshell,
Yeah, sure.
if we do. Let me see if this works. Oops, can you see my screen? Yep, it works.
We can see. Yeah. Yep, perfect.
That's pretty good. Okay, so not perfectly aligned, but I'll give you. So our model is very simple. We hire refugees, as I said, that we'd like to call them refugees by status, chefs by calling, and we provide quality jobs and dignified jobs. We connect the people who cook the food, in this case, refugee chefs, with the people who consume the food. So we call it human-centric and story-driven, because there's a story behind the person who cooked the food and the dishes as well. And also we're offering a unique discovery experience, because through this food, you're discovering different countries and you're connecting with the chefs. And it's it tends to be cuisines that are often not, that you can't find at the corner of every New York City restaurant. So Syrian, Senegalese, Sri Lankan, Nepalese, Venezuelan, etc., Afghanistan. So, and it's home style. We'll talk a little bit more later about the impact. So, and that's it. Thank you.
Awesome, thank you. Yeah, I really hope you, like, after this endemic, whatever happens, you're able to go back to catering, because
Yes.
it's great to have at a gala or an event, if you have these, in any one given meal, you'll have different cuisines from like at least 5 or 6 different countries on the spread, which is amazing. You can't get that at like usually just one restaurant. I'd like to pivot to talk about community a bit, because I think it's interesting how each of you are sort of contributing to, your local communities, but also increasing your sense of community. And I'm curious as to what you feel is your duty to your community, first and foremost, and then also what you're doing to increase the sense of your community during like the last couple of years. And I don't know who wants to start, but happy to have anyone of you take that.
Yeah, I can say a word or two. I think certainly, well, being a restaurant, we felt like we had a duty to the community to try to stay open and do everything we could to stay open, especially as some of you, I know most of you probably live in and around New York City. So it's no secret that, during 2020 into 2021, as the city was vacated by folks who were able to vacate it, it did become a little bit of a difficult place to be sometimes. And we saw a lot of change happening in the Times Square area, specifically even on our street, because corporate offices were basically closed. So you didn't see people walking around. I think us staying open and some of the other restaurants staying open may have potentially saved some of those neighborhoods from just being run over by many different things that were going on. It really started to look like the 80s in and around Times Square. I don't know if I'm dating myself, but so I felt like, at that point, there were periods where it was difficult for us to keep going, and we were, draining our bank account, but we did everything we could to just keep it going. And that was what I felt like was our obligation, not only to the community, but also to as many workers as we could keep employed. Yeah, that was what popped
Were
into
you
my
able
mind
to
there.
keep your employees? Yeah, were you able to keep your employees, all of your employees, or at least bring them back at some point?
Yeah, so at the height of we're a 2-floor restaurant with events, and we were open till 2 a.m. and before the pandemic during the weekends. And so we had actually at our height, we had 68 employees. We currently have 50 employees, so we're like, on our way back. But during the height of the pandemic, we were able to donate some. We received some donations. We raised money to donate food to hospitals and to local shelters. So what we were able to do is keep a few people employed, like some of the most vulnerable that weren't able to get unemployment or didn't have anywhere to turn. So at our low, we actually had 4 and then 5 employees who were the people that were in the worst off situation. And then a bunch of us who were able to collect unemployment, which just helped to do whatever we could to keep it going. So there was probably about, 6 to 8 other people who were just collecting unemployment, but then doing what they could to keep it going. Slowly then we were able to do like pickup and delivery as 2020 went on, and then, grew our way up to 10, 15, 20, and kind of on our way back. So now, yeah, we have brought back a majority of people that had wanted to come back, and are also going to be hiring some more, hopefully in the coming weeks.
That's great. Victoria, I know you kind of showed a couple of photos, but do you want to speak to like what you feel is your community and your sort of commitment to it?
Sure. Also, yeah, just huge kudos to both Jeff and Wissam. The food industry is difficult without a pandemic, extremely challenging. So the resilience of all of the folks in the industry is really incredible. Since this is focused on food, I'll just focus on the farm department, which faced a huge challenge when the pandemic hit, because pre-pandemic, about 70% of our produce was sold to wholesale accounts, so restaurants, online food distributors, et cetera. So we found ourselves in the middle, like just ramping up for the growing season with nowhere to send our food. No idea where we should, or what we should do with it. I mean, well, it was very clear immediately that the food was going to go to community members who were affected by the pandemic, but it took us some time to figure out how we wanted to work intentionally and work in solidarity with our community, which has been an ongoing process that has definitely humbled us and taught us a lot. We didn't want to set up just a straight donation model, but begin a program where we were really in communication with the community members, understanding what foods did they want, what foods they need. So for example, at our Sunset Park farm, we're surrounded by a largely Chinese American community. And at that farm, we grow a lot of Asian produce because folks were not interested in other things. And working in solidarity doesn't mean just giving them, what we have, but asking, like, what do you need? How can we build a relationship with you? Not just a transactional relationship. And in 2020, we also changed our CSA model to sliding scale, which was very exciting. For those of you who don't know what a CSA is, community supported agriculture is a practice done by many local farms. Members pay up front in the beginning of the season for a whole season's worth of vegetables. So they come to the farm, pick up their share that week, meet the farmers who have grown for them, get to see where their food is grown. It's really a special, incredible experience. And in 2020, we shifted that to sliding scale, which is super exciting because folks who are able to pay at the higher price point are supporting those who need a lower price point to access this fresh food. So it's this model that really allows our participants to work in economic solidarity with their own neighbors. And that's something that we've really grown this year. So not that we're post-pandemic, but in this time during the pandemic or after, I don't know how to really talk about that. We have really shifted how we look at our farms and where we grow, and we've moved away towards wholesale and grown with intentionality for community members.
Do you think you would go back to more wholesale, or you think you're going to focus more on staying community-based and focused going forward?
Yeah, I think we're definitely focused on growing for the community, growing our no-cost food distribution program, in which we work with mission-aligned businesses who help fund our program and help us grow and help us pay living wages for our farmers to distribute those foods to neighbors. So that and our sliding scale CSA is really where we're focusing all of our energy in the farm department.
That's really thank you. Wissam.
Yes, a lot of what Jeff and Victoria mentioned resonated with me. All of the challenges that you had during the pandemic, I could probably say the same story here. But to go back to the question of community, we view the two dimensions of community in Eat Off Beat. So if you think about our employees, so refugees, there we build a sense of community by making sure that we're providing what we like to call dignified employment with decent livable wages to talented refugee chefs. So that's on the employee side. But most importantly, there's also a sense of pride that comes with that. Because the chefs that are working with us, they're doing something that they really love, that they're passionate about, and they're bringing their culture and their traditions to New York and to the United States. And it's different than other jobs because they feel they're not having to adapt necessarily. Obviously, they're learning English, they're speaking all that, but they are they are feeling proud because now they see Americans that appreciate their cultures. So there's a lot of pride that comes with that. So that's on the employee side. I think you stole my word because we don't like to call our customers consumers or customers. We actually call it community, but here I have a word. So let's call it our audience. Audience is, the close audience is New Yorkers who share our values. And what we do there to foster a sense of community is we like to connect them with the chefs and the stories of the chefs and build bridges. In particular, we would like to change the narrative that is often prevalent in the media around refugees. It's often negative stories, sad stories. So we don't talk about all that. We're talking about good food, about happy moments, about things that bring joy when you enjoy the food. And then we try to build these bridges through the stories that we tell and through the food. Hopefully, we also, I hope that we not only are sharing this with New Yorkers who share our values, but perhaps with some that don't necessarily share them and we're changing their mind. I'm ambitious to think that we've done some of that. And finally, you mentioned, Raji, the in-person event. I'm really looking forward to this coming back because this is where we really used to create the sense of community with having us and the chefs present and our community of people who enjoy the food together in the same space. I think this is where it really comes up and shines.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to in-person events, period. I like,
yes,
but definitely for a sense of community as well, and to share good food. I want to pivot to nutrition because I think it's sometimes overlooked in these discussions, but it's so important. And there's always a new fad that's going on, like when kale became popular. And but I want to know what ways you're seeking to help our communities become healthier. So where are you sourcing your food from? What kind of ingredients do you use? Do you highlight your health benefits of the either the produce you're growing or the food that you're serving?
I'm happy to start off with this one. Yeah, I think it's it's a complex thing because what is a food fad? Who decides what foods are trending and why are those foods trending? Who decides what's good for your body, for the culture that you come from and what foods that you're comfortable eating? At the Grange, the vision that we really seek, and the mission that we are working towards, is food sovereignty. This is the right for people to have access to fresh and healthy foods that are culturally relevant to them, people to choose what they want to eat and be able to, to have access to those things. So for us, I talked about this briefly when I talked about a no-cost food program, but we really work closely with our community-based organization partners who help distribute our food to better understand what it is folks need and want. And through ongoing discussions, we try to really better cater to those things. So those foods look different from farm to farm. We also are always learning from those folks. Sometimes that means we're growing new foods that we've never grown before. And sometimes it's an experiment because, we're a rooftop farm in New York City. We can't grow everything. There's some limitations. But this is something in which we love doing because not only are we giving to our community, but the community is really teaching us a lot, which is really important for our growth. Yeah, and through our sliding scale CSA, I think something that we really aim to achieve is how to empower the consumer to participate in capitalism. So by offering them access to foods and participating in the same system that people of all different kind of economic backgrounds have is really important to us. Everyone deserves access to nutritious, locally grown produce. How can we provide that in a way, that is actually accessible?
I can go next if you want on this one. So in our food, it's not necessarily focused on specific diets, or I wouldn't call it necessarily light. Rather, we do have a rich vegan offering, so that it's not exclusively vegan, but there is a rich vegan offering. It's not necessarily in terms of ingredients organic, although I hope at some point we would be able to do that, but there's a different price point for that. But what characterizes the food is that it's wholesome, and it's definitely cooked with fresh ingredients. Because of the countries where it comes from, you don't use processed ingredients. So it definitely feels homemade and wholesome, and you're eating the same food that the chefs cook for their families at home. So that's the difference. It's the difference in how it's made. In these countries, like in the country that I came from, it's definitely frowned upon if you eat sandwiches or if you eat cans or frozen food that's reheated. So it always has to be cooked from scratch, and that's what we offer. The other thing that differentiates the food is how you consume it, because it's served family style, not in the individual portions. So it's, again, going back to the sense of community, it encourages you to eat that, and at events, you're sitting at the table, even if you're 2 people or 3 people or the family, you're sharing and you're eating it family style instead of individual portions. Yeah, and like we like to call it, so there's the food for the body, it's wholesome, for the mind, because there's a story behind the dish, and finally for the soul, because of this sense of community and the connection with the chef that we build. So, and last thing I would say in terms of how we prepare the food, we don't have yet a factory style of preparing the food. It's a bit individual preparation, which is good and bad, because on the cost side, it's not necessarily great. Each dish is a little bit different, but you can feel the individuality also of each dish and who is preparing it. So that, in a nutshell, maybe what characterizes the nutrition aspect of our food.
Yeah, that must be difficult. I wonder if there's and do you source like from local farms nearby, and where do you get your food from mostly? Like the food that you're using to cook with?
So a lot of 80% of the food is common ingredients. It's something that we get from typical, wholesale supply, but maybe 10 to 20% is very specific ingredients that are country specific, and it comes from specialty stores. Some of them, even the chefs themselves would bring their own spices from wherever they have. I mean, that's a small portion, but that's where it comes from today. But maybe we will connect with Victoria. Perhaps we would have opportunities to collaborate, because I'd love to take this further. I love what you're doing. Yes.
Definitely.
Yeah, definitely. I think maybe both Jeff and Wissam can maybe source and get some food from your farms. I remember, Wissam, you said something that I lived in Italy once, and I was trying to cook Indian food for my friends there, and I luckily had brought some spices with me, because I went everywhere and I couldn't find the spices I needed. So yeah. I understand that. I definitely understand that. Jeff?
Yeah, definitely want to connect with Victoria and see what we can do, especially nowadays with so many supply chain issues and price fluctuation issues. That's one of our biggest problems right now. In the spirit of transparency as to what's going on with the local purveyors and also with the wholesale purveyors. So for us on nutrition, I don't want to be the preachy vegan, but maybe that's my role here. I don't know. But I mean, you can Google it. We're all smart people at this, right? So we know we can Google the harms of meat, dairy, and eggs on not only the environment, and of course what they do to those animals, but also what it does to us nutritionally. I would argue that as a non-nutritionist, just as a vegan person who is doing it out of love for animals, but I understand that these products aren't really necessarily good for us long term, meat, dairy, and egg products specifically. So we would argue that our food is probably going to be more nutritionally sound than anything you would potentially get that would be not a plant-based item. I mean, is this the most healthy food in the world? I mean, we do fry some food, and we do have some things that would be considered processed food. But then again, it's not McDonald's or anything like that where you're extremely processed food, but it's also has that impact on the environment and the animals. So yeah, and as far as sourcing, we do have a lot of issues finding things, especially now. And but we use all local distributors. So even if the produce comes from all the way up in upstate New York, or even something that might come from Florida or California, it's distributed by a company. Mostly what we purchase is distributed by a company out of the Bronx. We also work with Ace Natural, which I'm sure you guys have heard of, and they're out of Queens or Mount Vernon now, and they have some warehouses and fridges and stuff in the boroughs. So we do use a lot of, actually, all local distributors for like our daily purchases. And I'd like to do more of that too. It's just a matter of being able to have things all the time. So sometimes we've been approached by some smaller operations where we'll let them know, like, hey, we're going to need this amount of mushrooms every week or this amount every month. And if they might not necessarily be able to keep up with us. So we can't necessarily change the menu every day or every week based on that. So that's a challenge as well sometimes. But yeah, in the future, I would love to start growing some produce on the roof of our building. That would be amazing.
Do you have a rooftop that you can do that with?
Yeah, we do. I mean, we have, there's a rooftop of our actual building. We rent there, so we don't own the building. We have a good relationship with the landlord. But then we do have a section of the roof that is just exclusively ours. And we tried like doing some herbs out there, but then we just got some of the timing off on it. But we're gonna try to do something again. I'll have to pick Victoria's.
Should hire someone from Victoria's team, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, she can help you.
Yeah, I definitely want to show you the rooftop in the very least.
Definitely. We built a rooftop garden or little farm for Rosemary's in East Village, and it's really fun working with the chefs directly. Yeah, so give us a call.
Awesome. So I'd love to we can talk about the next topic probably for hours, but the future of food. So what does the future of food look like for you? And there's sort of technology at play and how that can play an impact as well. I myself, my friend is an investor of, I forget the name of the company, but they're doing lab grown meats now. Like there's all sorts of things that are happening that are also hoping to have a better impact on the environment. We can start with that, but I'd love to talk about more of the future of food. But why don't we start with what does the future of food look like to you, and how are you seeing changes in the way food is either grown or distributed or produced, served?
Yeah, I could start really quickly. I think we're probably going to have to see a lot of changes in how food is both grown and distributed and consumed in the future, just because what we're seeing with climate change and the environmental impact of food and is just so grand. So something has to give in order for us to continue as a species on this path. That's really what I believe. So right, so things like more locally grown food, right? People being able to grow their own food, people being able to have access to food that doesn't have to travel long distances, and also the food changing, like the lab grown meat. Imagine you could grow, an entire farm's worth of meat, which would take up large amounts of space where they cut down trees and all of that. But you could potentially grow that just inside a lab, like one small building. I mean, I'm sure that's where it's all going. The subsidies that the U.S. government provides to specifically to the meat industry is what makes it possible for that industry even to exist. If those subsidies weren't there, the insustainability of the meat industry would put themselves out of business. So at some point, people are going to realize that that doesn't work either. And there's going to be change. So that's what I believe. I think we're kind of headed towards less animal products and more towards lab grown meat and plant-based alternatives that are very similar. I think that's where it's headed.
Yeah, I think I also want to remind folks that when the pandemic shut down our country, there were all these articles of, farms that, and like ours, who were like, well, where do we send our produce? We have tons and tons of food, actually. There's not a shortage of food. We just don't know how to direct them to the folks who need them. So I think there's a bit of a narrative in certain industries that we've run out of land, the population is growing too large, we just don't have enough space to grow for people. And I think that is definitely false. I think the issue is not about space. Our land is incredible. It provides and it does wonderful things. It's how we use it. And then after we grow it, what the systems in which we distribute it, and also our consuming habits, right? I think we find a lot of us probably waste a lot more food than we'd like to. And is that, a cultural issue in how we consume, and how can we be better in turn, treat our environment better, treat our land better. So I think what I'm trying to say is there's really no one size fits all solution. Every community has different needs, located in different geographic areas, has different types of land that they can grow on. So the needs and the resources look different from place to place. As a soil-based farm, obviously we're a little bit biased and we really believe in traditional soil-based farms, but that doesn't mean we, don't also see the value of controlled environment agriculture, CEA, which gained a lot of popularity in the past few years. Lots of money going into that industry to grow in warehouses, grow, in shipping containers. And I think that all that is really wonderful. I think it's definitely a collaborative effort. We need to change. I mean, we're in climate crisis. We're not, we're in it and we see it every day. So we have to change how we operate. But that doesn't mean that, we must shift everything to that. I think it's really a holistic approach in looking at all sides of the food industry, from the growing to the distributing to the consuming, in which we can really start to have conversations of how to deal with this massive issue.
Yeah, I'll build on that. It's obviously very hard to predict the future and talk about the future. I can only be certain that if I did that, I would be wrong, but I can tell you what I hope the future will be like. So I can talk about that. I mean, first, I definitely agree with everything that Jeff and Victoria said about the environmental impact. If I think about perhaps some trends, you look at in the past, people became more conscious about what they put in their body, about health and diets and all that. Now there's definitely more consciousness about environmental impact. Jeff, you talked a lot about that, Victoria as well. So impact of eating meat, waste, supply chain, eating local. I think, or I hope that we will have also increasing consciousness about social impact of our food as well, which is things like making sure that whoever is producing the food, whether from the farmer to the employee to the chef, there's decent labor wages, there's decent labor conditions, there's diversity, and there's an understanding of the supply chain from where it has been grown until where we reach it. And I hope also it fits with our model that consumers, people enjoying the food, will have a desire and curiosity to understand all this and to connect with the people that are producing their food. And I hope the technology also can help that, the traceability and the understanding, bringing this transparency of how the food is produced, I think will be important. So that's my wish list rather than my predictions, but put it out.
Yeah, no, go ahead, Victoria.
I just really appreciate you raising up, the fair wages. I think this is something that people don't realize about the food industry. It's, again, pre-pandemic, it was already deeply, deeply flawed. When we think about the price of the food we eat, like, we don't understand how much labor goes into making that.
Yeah.
A huge problem that we faced as a company when we started, it was a rooftop farming company. We wanted to grow, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of pounds of produce across rooftops across New York City. Financially, the number or the economics of selling food and making a profit, not great. Like, I feel like if you ask anybody in the food industry, the economics of the industry are really poor. And it's because a lot of reasons. But I think we really need to shift our thinking. And this is like, I really don't know how this starts and how it happens on a wide level of like the value of the food we eat. And then also the prices of the food we eat. It's kind of wild that you can get an avocado for $1 and it's come from another country. What does that mean? Who paid for that? Because somebody did. So yeah, I just appreciate you using that with some.
No, absolutely. That's very true. And actually, if I can add one thing to my wish list, one dream that I have is if we could have labels that almost like the fair trade for coffee that can designate the companies that are treating their employees fairly.
Mm-hmm.
I think that would help a lot. So put it out there as well.
And also not only the employees, but showing the supply chain and where it came from and how many shipping containers did it have to go through, and was it picked like a week or 2 weeks before it was ripe and ready, because just so it can get there and ripen on the shelf for you. I think this is a huge issue. And I think in the Western world, we're used to having every cuisine and everything at our fingertips. And so there's so much more waste that goes with that, and so much more shipping and so much more, environmental sort of destruction because of it. And it's when you're in a smaller country, and that maybe is not as wealthy, you're used to just eating the cuisines from there because you're local, you're just getting what's locally made and grown. You don't have the luxury of being able to ship from, there was, I don't know, pre-pandemic, there was a place out in Chicago that used to fly in Kona crab from Hawaii to to serve to their guests. I mean, is delicious, but they're flying it in from Hawaii. They're a landlocked city. So I wonder, our distribution might change. Just like our electric grid, our distribution channels on our electric bills are limited, but our food doesn't seem to be, because of all the subsidies that are brought in on top of that. And so you're paying sort of a very depressed price for something, and you're not valuing it. And I think that's why there's so much waste, because we don't have the true value of the avocado that, Victoria, you get for $1.
Definitely.
I've seen a lot of places come up that are now sharing and starting to sell what are they called? Like almost secondhand produce, where they don't look nice, but they're just as good, or maybe they're like, there's a couple of like dings on them, and they sell them for less. But I think it's a great idea. And I think there's people, just like people are trying to do recycled clothing now, where you're reusing and selling secondhand clothing, and it's becoming trendy thankfully to not have so much waste in the clothing industry. I think hopefully the food will start to follow as well, not just in bigger cities, but elsewhere as well. Great. Before we open it up to questions, I did want to just mention to those folks who did register and who are on the call, Wissam has graciously sort of offered to give a discount to anyone who has attended today to snack boxes that he has online. So Wissam, I'll let you explain, and you can put the code in, and we'll email the code out to folks after as well.
Yes, no, it's exactly what you said. So discount codes, not just for the snack boxes that ship nationwide, but also for our meal boxes. So hopefully they'll give us a try in New York for the meal boxes. I'll put the discount code at CCNYC15 for 15% off, but very simple. And if you have any issues, please, I sent my email as well, email me.
Great, thank you. So I'm happy to open it up for questions if you want to chat them or raise your hand. So you can come off camera if you feel comfortable and ask your question directly.
I'll jump in with one that is open to all three of the guests. As someone who sits on the investor side, a big question that always comes up when we're looking at potential investments is diversity and inclusion. Kind of who is the composition of your company? And when people are maybe not so optimistic about their composition, they'll say, well, we're open to it. We just can't find diverse people. We don't have access to this pool or that pool. And my opinion is obviously that's just like a lack of effort, in my opinion. But I'd be curious, kind of what does your process look like when you're ensuring that obviously that's part of the fabric of all three of these businesses? Kind of what does that process look like, and how do you ensure that that's kind of something that's key to the fabric of your organization? So I'd love to know so I can have a really strong rebuttal when I hear we don't do that from the investments that I look at. So.
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in. I'm really proud to say that our company, we have a BIPOC working group. For those who don't know, it's the Black, Indigenous, People of Color working group that works really closely with our core leadership team on a number of things, including hiring. It's something new, so we're still working out like what is our mandate and how do we support our BIPOC employees, but it's really wonderful. How do you find people? It's a big problem, I think, across all industries. I think definitely you're right in that people just are not putting in the effort. But for example, like a lot of our jobs on the farm team, when we look at people's backgrounds, there's like a certain amount of things that we want, which is every company, right? But at the end of the day, a lot of our farmer jobs are things that can be taught. So what is the entry level in which somebody can, that we're enforcing for people to join? Like there's a lot of folks, who went to, top tier schools and studied environmental science, sustainability, urban agriculture. But what about the folks who are interested in that and didn't have those degrees? Like, is this why do we have to raise that level of entry so high for a job that we're able to train? So I think there are various things such as that. Also, building relationships with organizations that we feel are mission aligned and do a good job at this, so that they can help in our recruiting, who can support us. So who are our heroes, and like what are they doing really well, and how can we learn from them? Building with them so we can also, broaden our networks as well. That's a huge thing, and it takes time. And also during the actual hiring process, who is sitting in on those meetings? How does that affect the interview? How does that impact like what they think of the interviewee and how the interviewee feels? So creating a really inclusive hiring board, so that conversation, that initial meeting point, is one that can be as inclusive as possible, is really important. And that doesn't mean always like having the people who are directly in the department. It's having people who are, cross-departmental hiring boards, so that people, have, I don't know, just better breath, just really people-to-people contact, human contact. Yeah, so those are a few things that we do.
Yeah, I think I notice for us, my previous career, I had worked in finance and worked for a Wall Street firm, and I know that there was always talk of diversity and bringing in groups of folks, just trying to get all kinds of different folks in there culturally, and to make the workplace a better environment. It was a beautiful thing that they worked on, but they had to work on it, and they had to work hard on it. So I think I'm lucky to be in the restaurant industry in New York City, because I don't feel like it's something we have to put a tremendous amount of effort into, because it just naturally breeds a ground of diversity, where we're just a beautiful group of people from all over the world. We have different languages spoken all over the restaurant and people from all different continents. And what we do try to do is, and we've done this, and we have women in leadership roles, specifically like in our kitchen. It's nice to have that. And we also have a management team that reflects the staff as well. So that works well for us too. So we keep an eye on all of those things, and we see that it sort of naturally has taken care of itself over the course of the time we've been around.
Yeah, I mean, this is a very important question, such an important question, and I'm struggling a little bit to give it a meaningful answer, because I wear two hats. There's another company that I'm involved with where this is a very big problem. At Eat Off Beat, it's actually in our DNA, the diversity. So we're a small company where we don't have yet procedures and everything. But the interesting thing is, because of our business model, it's in our incentive to try to find new cuisines, new countries that represent people from all the continents, actually. So I hope we will have the opportunity to grow. And as we grow, our primary goal is to hire chefs from all over. Now, next thing is, how do we also help our people grow and take responsibilities in our company? And that's something that we're thinking about investing in. And especially, we're starting to work now on a program to have our employees be owners of the company. That was a condition that our investors actually put on us, and thankfully they did, because we're working with them. We're just working through the legality of it. But I think for our model, that's what makes most sense. Besides the hiring, is to make sure that the employees are also owners and stakeholders in the company.
Great. Amanda, did you have a question?
Yes. And I'll apologize in advance, because of course my son just started crying. So ignore the baby. But my question is a little bit more specifically just for Jeff. So it just strikes me, or I just want to know the basis for opening a vegan restaurant in Times Square. Because I think most people, when you think about, I lived in New York and in the surrounding area, and like, I don't think of Times Square as like a vegan hub. So I just wanted to hear kind of the thought process of why Times Square, and obviously the business has been there for years now, so it worked. And what do you think has led to that?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I will give the honest answer. When I had owned part owned a couple of vegan restaurants before I was pulled onto this project, and the co-founder, the two co-founders, they had really set their hearts on being in this neighborhood. The opening team actually we were a little skeptical of it as well. So, in just being frank, we were a little concerned about that. But it just took a little bit. It took a little bit longer to kind of catch on. I think it probably would have been a little easier in, downtown West Village, East Village, Lower East Side, or Williamsburg, Upper West Side. Would have been probably caught on very quickly. But once we did get going, we really did take off. So I think it was a little bit more challenging in the beginning, but then once it started rolling, it really took off. We became very popular with the Broadway crowd. People don't realize, people don't always realize that not only does Broadway feeds the restaurant industry in Times Square, but it's not just the ticket holders. There's a tremendous amount of cast and crew that are in all of those shows. A lot of those folks are into healthy eating. You see how they perform. They're in excellent condition physically. They like to eat this type of food. And once we caught on with a couple of people from a couple of the shows, it just sort of snowballed from there. So yeah, I had the same thoughts. I thought, oh, wow, it's going to be a little challenging in the tourist district, but in the end, it proved to be the right decision from the co-founders, and they took a leap, and they were right to do so. And it's nice to have, there's a lot of neighborhoods in New York City that are really saturated with vegan and vegan options. And it really does help us that we're like, kind of one of the only places like that in that area. So if you walk out of a hotel anywhere between, 40th Street all the way up into the 50s or even further, and you type vegan into Google or into your phone, vegan restaurant or vegan vegetarian, we're like the first thing that comes up. And that's not because we're paying for that. It's just because we're the only thing that's close. So it's kind of been, it's been a mixed bag, but at this point feel like it was the right decision, although I also felt the same way at first.
Yeah, you're almost like in a vegan desert, right? Like there's food deserts, you're in a vegan desert. So that's good for you because you're the oasis in the middle of it.
Yeah, I would think so. I mean, I'd be happy to see vegan restaurants on every block. And like I said, I part-owned other restaurants that were vegan and which have now closed. But we had vegan place open across the street, then a vegan place open next door. They were quick service places. And when things were going good, it just kind of made us better, so it was okay. So kind of both things are good. If places open up that have similar food, that's great for the impact it has also. And if they don't, that's okay too. We're there to serve people that want to eat this type of food.
Great. I think we have time for one more question. Ralph, I see your hand up. Do you want to come up? Cameron?
I want to thank the panel, first of all, because the diversity of your point of view is terrific. We have from growing to cooking, feeding. This is fabulous. But I'm curious, it's a notoriously difficult space in terms of margins and the ability to make a profit. And I'm wondering if you could speak to how conscious capitalism and running a conscious business affects you guys in that way. Maybe Victoria, I can immediately see the advantages perhaps of being local to the city and possibly saving on transportation costs, but all of you have your challenges. Could you speak to those for a moment, please?
Yeah, I think I alluded to this earlier, but when the company started, it started as a rooftop farming company, and very quickly the co-founders realized it's very difficult to make money off of food. But luckily, we very naturally built our programming and events department and our design build department. So having those diverse revenue streams has really been the reason why we succeeded. So it's like really not a surprise that, our farms, our food is not what's making the money for the company. It's not the one that's driving our growth. It's our ability to build green spaces for clients throughout the city. It's our ability to host, events on our farm. And all of that, allow us to continue our mission, which is so definitely a diverse revenue stream for us, but very lucky that all those revenue streams still, allow us to do what we want to do and are ones that we're proud of.
It's great thinking outside the box. Jeff, Do you have challenges in running a consciously capital sort of business?
Yeah, I don't know that it's any more challenging than running just a restaurant that, you're not thinking outside the box at all. I mean, there's always going to be issues that come up, but I don't know that they're necessarily more difficult because of any of the good things we're doing, if you will. I think the mission, as I mentioned, hiring folks from underprivileged backgrounds, donating all the profits to charity, the plant-based vegan aspect, I think all of that is what helps people want to support us. I know we wouldn't have been able to raise the money we did during the pandemic to donate food to the hospitals and shelters if it wasn't for that mission, because the mission is what popularized us and got people hearing about us. So we stood out for that. So in fact, I think it might be quite the truth that, having like a social mission, conscious capitalism, that these are the kind of things that will separate some people, they in the future, right? That this is probably the new way to do business, hopefully.
Love it. Love it. Wissam?
Yeah, I will echo what Jeff said. To be completely honest, it's very challenging food business. Before the pandemic, what helped us is our social impact and conscious capitalism positioning, because we got a lot of PR and media, and that's how we started. We started with very little money, basically no money, but it's just the PR that we got, the coverage, the interest that at the time there was in the refugee cause helped us a lot. And we were doing very well. So COVID has been difficult. And interestingly enough, more so the second year than the first year. The first year, we got a lot of the donations, the restaurant workers, that helped us a lot. The second year was very weird. 2021 was very tough, I'll be honest, because all the donations stopped. That wasn't an issue anymore. A lot of people left New York, especially from our audience, I would call. And it was just, I mean, we had to survive. And that's why we innovated in gift boxes and different meal boxes. We introduced themes. Now it's slowly coming back, but thankfully we had some investors that also helped us and understand the mission. And now you know, that understand the potential for the future.
It sounds, thank you all. It sounds like thinking outside the box is a requirement for this kind of a business. Well done.
Yeah, thank you, Ralph, for that question. I think it's been, you guys have not only been able to pivot and think out of the box, but I think it's especially in the food industries, right, is particularly challenging. But everyone's sort of had to pivot or most people have had to pivot in the pandemic, in this new reality we're living in, which hopefully will start to come to some sort of the new normal in the coming months. But I wanted to thank our panelists and all of you for joining. We're 1 minute over time, but I hope you enjoyed the discussion. Also, thank you to Cynthia and Amalgamated as our sponsor. So they're going to be our sponsor for the coming events for the year as well. So please keep an eye out, sign up for our mailing list, and you'll be able to join our future events as well. And you should be getting a follow-up email with the discount code for Wissam, but also for how to sign up and stay engaged. So thanks again. Have a wonderful evening.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.